Well, hello, MOAA family. I am Renae Myles-Payne, President of MOAA, the Minority Opportunities Athletic Association. And today we are having a conversation, what we call MOAA Courageous Conversations. This is a thoughtful place for our members to share their personal experiences. And we seek to amplify and educate and support our members and their voices through these platforms. Today, we're going to speak with two of our members, Jason Fein and Jackie Schuman, on some topics that have been raised across the nation, but that have touched them specifically, and how it has affected them on their respective campuses. So first of all, what I would like to do is let each one of them give a couple of minute intro of themselves, and a little background and history of them and their family. And then we will go into some deeper dives and questions that have pertained to how some of the current things in the nation around the Jewish community has affected them personally. So I'm going to start tonight with Jason Fein. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Renae, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about myself. I'm currently the athletic director at Bates College and proud MOAA member and board member. And for those that don't know me, I will just say that my time as a member of MOAA and working with MOAA has been, some of the most rewarding aspects of my career in athletics. So appreciate this time and being asked to come on. I grew up, as anyone that knows me knows, I grew up in New York City and Brooklyn, New York. I never really gave too much thought to my religion as part of my identity, if I'm being completely frank, which I plan on doing here during this conversation tonight. My family, growing up, my dad was a taxi driver in New York, and after that, a postal service employee. So definitely kind of a blue collar family. My mom was actually born in Germany and came to America on a boat with her parents when she was 5 months old. And that happened after the Holocaust, when both of her parents were in concentration camps. So I grew up, hearing those stories, thinking of it almost as fantasy stuff that could not be real. And obviously, we've come to a time right now that a lot of that is back in the news and at the forefront of folks' minds. So I'll stop there with the intro, but look forward to talking here tonight, and I'll turn it over to Jackie.
Hi, so I will echo, thank you for having me here today. Thanks, Renae, for taking the time. Thanks, Jason, for being a part of this as well. And thanks to MOAA for holding the space for us. So my name is Jackie Schuman. I'm currently the Vice Chancellor and Director of Athletics and Recreation at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And a little bit about my background. So I grew up in North Jersey, 10 minutes outside of New York City. People always ask where exactly. So about 10 miles from the George Washington Bridge. My family background, so my dad is Jewish and my mom is Christian. So I grew up religiously Christian, and I would say ethnically, culturally Jewish. And so being Jewish was a huge part of my identity. My dad grew up in the Bronx in New York City. And my mom actually was born in Indonesia. So also not born here in the States, mainly Dutch Indonesian, immigrated to the Netherlands, and then moved here to the States, to Chicago originally. And so even though we were raised religiously Christian, I always say from the time we were born, we essentially learned about what it was to be Jewish and the history of our family and how that impacted the values that were taught to us, and very specifically the values that my dad, as an educator, a high school teacher, and track coach, made sure he instilled in us around fairness and equity and justice. And so, I can remember very clearly the things that I learned about what happened to my family, which predated me. My dad's family came over here as his grandfather had to actually escape Poland because he was being essentially harassed and mistreated in the military by his commanding officer and was scared he would be killed. And so he fought back, and then he had to escape Poland to get away. And it's this odd, fortunate way that they came to the States because it was right before the Holocaust. And I remember asking my dad, well, where is your family from in Poland? And they're from Lodz, Poland. And my next question was, so tell me about Lodz. And he said, it's pretty simple. They were exterminated. People in Lodz, Poland were exterminated in the Holocaust. So essentially the fact that his grandfather escaped because he had to leave because of the anti-Semitism and his response to it actually probably is the reason that we exist today. And so there's story after story after story like that, my dad really intentionally used to teach us the importance of how we teach people and make sure that we are treating people with fairness, that we are very intentionally fighting against racism, inequity, and doing everything we can to be inclusive. And from the time we were little kids, my brothers and I, we were the ones that were like, stop it, you can't say that, that's mean. Stop it, you shouldn't do that, that's racist. And that transitioned into me being really clear and intentional about when I decided to work in college sports, and sports being what I think is like the sort of equalizer for all of us, and that we all get the opportunity to come together from all different backgrounds and accomplish the same goal. I very intentionally set along a path to make sure that every single position I was in, I would be engaged in doing social justice work to advance the really important issues in our society and use what is this really powerful and unique platform that we have in sports for doing so. So a little bit about my background, and it's definitely influenced where I am today, my life's work, I would say, that goes beyond, just working in college sports, but making sure it's a really intentional and important vehicle for education and advancing the things that are really values to me, like fairness and equity and inclusion.
Wow. So both of you, I mean, because I know both of you, hearing more about your background that I did not know, and having known both of you for a long time, thank you, because it enlightens me more even to about why you move the way you move and why the equity and the diversity is so important to you. Not just because it's the right thing to do, it's because you lived it, because your family has lived it, and that's important to MOAA as well. So I'm going to stick with Jackie here. Just tell us a little bit about your faith and how it plays a role in your life at work and maybe at home. Some examples of some practices or something that you may have. Some historical moments for you that you may have experienced as well, being from the Jewish faith. So give us some history or background on that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was like the cool kid who got to celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah. So everyone thought I got extra presents, but that's actually not how it works, especially if you come from a family that doesn't have a lot of means. But we essentially, because of my mom's side and the Christian faith, and then my dad's side, were always engaged in celebrating holidays of both religions. And so growing up, I essentially, even though we were practicing Christian faith, this is where I say like the Jewish identity was such a big part of my life. So I was constantly going to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. I remember turning to my dad saying, okay, well, can we do a bat mitzvah? And can I have one? And he was like, you have to go to Hebrew school. What are you doing? What are you talking about? So are you going to transition now and was like, okay, no, I guess I won't do that. I guess we're not doing that. So anyway, we were doing both, right? We were going to Seders, you know, for holidays. I was watching my dad fasting during holidays, and so I was very much involved in that. We would go to temple on specific holidays, and you know, that had a really big impact on my understanding. So regardless of the fact that we were practicing Christian, Judaism was a huge part of our identity as well. I would share, we always kind of felt like we were not sort of like fully this or fully that. Like when we were in school, everyone in our school was Christian, and then we were half Jewish. So people were confused about that. And we went to day camp, and in day camp, everyone was Jewish. So they were like, well, what are you doing here? You're Christian. So we kind of always felt like, are we like, do we have a place here? Where are we? But I say all that to say it was a huge part of, you know, our family and our practice. And then when you're talking about sort of historical and impactful moments, you know, there are two really impactful moments to me. When I visited the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., it was a pretty, it was important, it was scary, and I could barely stomach it. I was in there for hours. Like I couldn't get myself out of it. And then there was a point where I ran out because I couldn't handle it anymore. You know, and then I, several years ago, went to Israel and went to the Holocaust Museum there as well. That was very impactful. It also was really impactful being in Israel, candidly, you know, in my experience and everything I have learned and seen and come to understand, I really wanted to experience what it was like to be in Israel, this beautiful, beautiful place. And it's interesting, as you go into Jerusalem, you see people of all different cultures and religious backgrounds living amongst each other together. You also see all the levels of protections that need to be had everywhere because of the challenges of living in a place like that, including the fact that you're going to go to the airport 4 hours before you leave, and you'll probably just make it to your gate in time because of all the security measures to ensure that you are not dealing with terrorism. And because of all of the attacks and the problems and the conflicts, even while you're in this beautiful place where people of all different backgrounds are living among each other, it was a very impactful moment for me, especially being Christian and being Jewish, and then being in that environment that is rich in culture and diversity and religion. And I felt like everybody in the world should come to a place like this and see it and experience it. And so it's a very sad time, because these are two really historical moments that, one, you know, lead to where we are today. Because what I saw in the Holocaust Museum, the scariest thing about what I'm seeing today is I saw things in the Holocaust Museum that I'm seeing today happening. And I will never forget the things that I saw in that museum. And I cannot help but see the tie to, here's how this happened, here's how this is happening right now. And then I am reflecting on this beautiful, beautiful place that, you know, I have learned from the time that I was a very little kid. It's the one safe place, the one place that we know is the safe place for Jews, where at the same time, when you go in there, all these people are living amongst each other, and there's all these protections because it's a place that is constantly in battle. And so those have been really impactful moments for me in my life. And, you know, it's a really important thing to my family, you know, this religion, this culture, this ethnicity, this background. And it's a really important part of my identity. And it makes it really a troubling time right now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Jackie. Jason, what about you? Any impactful moments for you in your life? When you think about your faith and how it impacts you at work and home?
Yeah, you know, my experience is probably a little bit different than Jackie's growing up. And you know, Jackie being in the North Jersey area growing up, and me in New York. you never really felt, I would say unsafe, as a member of a certain religion or group. I remember my group of friends growing up. For those people old enough, to remember the Benetton commercials, but like we were like the United Colors of Benetton ad. We had one of everything in our group growing up, and very rarely did we talk much about religion. We knew if we went to someone's house and there was a cross, or if someone was Muslim or Jewish, we were aware of that. But it didn't, kind of permeate things and become kind of real to me until I was really old enough to, sit with my grandfather before he passed, and my grandmother, and hear the stories of, where they were from, which also, depending on which year in time you're talking about, was either Poland or Lithuania, right? And because of war. And my grandparents were not, lucky enough to escape beforehand, like Jackie mentioned in her story earlier. So, there was a lot of discussion around, the table. I think it was therapy in a form probably from my grandparents, because they weren't able to really grow up talking about it. And like I said, my mom was just a baby when they came over. They had been liberated, but and I consider the group here in MOAA, family, and we haven't had many conversations about this, but I had an uncle who was taken by the Nazis as a baby, and never met him. He may have been killed. He may have been brought up somewhere else, but that was what happened. So I know that was something that was super impactful for my grandmother and my family, to think about that, what happened to him. As a kid, I did not experience a lot of I did not know that you could be Jewish and Christian. I didn't know that you had that different, because spiritually, I didn't have the benefit of celebrating Christmas and Hanukkah, as you mentioned. I did get a lot of socks and underwear from my mom. On, they got to stretch those 8 days out, right?
I mean, that's pretty much what I was probably getting.
Yeah, right.
Just over 2 holidays.
But we had, so many friends and extended family of all faiths. So, some of my best memories, and to this day, for my entire life, I've spent with the same family on Christmas Eve every year. So even as a Jewish person, that was our Christmas. So, but not until later on did I know much about how you could be spiritually or culturally, kind of in both these worlds, unless you were just kind of half, because your parents married, right? And one was Jewish and one was Catholic, or one was Jewish and one was Christian. I never really, I have cousins that live in Israel. My cousin, who actually lives on a kibbutz south of Tel Aviv, their windows were blown out of their apartment, on October 7th, during when all that was going on. I have a cousin who lives here in the States, and his sister was able to get their kids and come over here for a while, and get out of there when things were starting to go crazy. But it really, all through my life, I didn't visit Israel, and I didn't visit my family there, and I've met my cousins when they came to the States, and I know that they were in the army, but I never, until this past year, I was in Israel this summer.
Oh, wow.
I was there 6 weeks before October 7th. And a lot of mornings and conversations I've talked about since then was, what if that group woke up on August 7th and said, today's the day, instead of October 7th? Then, my life is a lot different, obviously, if that happens. So I agree with Jackie. It's super impactful. I didn't realize how moving it would necessarily be. I was very lucky, because I've been able to combine my passions working in our field, and I actually visited the Western Wall in Jerusalem with the Kansas State basketball team and the Arizona men's basketball team. And it was so impactful to see young people, college age, who were, we also went to the Holocaust Museum, and seeing what they saw and identifying in their way. Most of the folks we were with um, would identify as Black. We had Native American. We had we had these conversations. It was so impactful to them to see what had happened, because they were able to, draw the parallels between the struggles that they had, their families have had, their ancestors have had. So it was a really amazing moment. But I was, everyone says, and Jackie probably had this experience too, that they go, well, you're really not ready for it until you're there. Because what you see and you can spend a lot of time there, and you see things like, a collection of shoes from the kids that, were trucked into the concentration camp or through on the trains, and these kind of mass graves. And it becomes very real when you realize that you had family members that were involved in that. At the end of the museum, there's a room, because they're trying to identify all 6 million people that were killed, right? So you have these gigantic books with names. And then there's blank books at the end, people, where they haven't identified yet. And you go in there and you look up your family names, right? And you do that. And I was just overwhelmed. Like, it just, hit me, that this is a reality that throughout my whole life, had not thought of. I had a bar mitzvah when I was 13, and my grandparents, I know it was a little important to them that we'd go on high holidays and fast on Yom Kippur and things like that. But once they passed and I grew up, I sort of, not parted ways, but definitely was not as observant. So I will agree with Jackie that this current time we're living in, has a lot of similarities to some of the things that as a kid I learned about, I read about, I've gone back and read more. And I think that, we have to, people need to know the history.
Mhm.
And if we don't, then we're going to be doomed to repeat it. And I think that I would not count TikTok as the place to get your knowledge and history, but that's probably getting into another question. So I'll stop there.
Well, Jason, I was going to ask, why did you wait, so long to go? I thought, isn't there's like a trip? Yeah, everyone.
Birthright.
Yeah, the birthright trip that you're supposed to have.
Yeah. And I always thought I'd get around to it one day. And I always had a different excuse. And I, like many of the things in my life, I used work as an excuse probably for a lot of things I haven't done. I had family who would, they were having a wedding or something like that, and people would go over, and I was, had something else to do. But to be completely frank, I had some issues with probably some of the political issues that folks are bringing up now, right? And I think it's a real misconception that you are proud of being Jewish, or you're pro-Israel, or you're some political statement. And to me, they were always kind of a little bit conflated when they shouldn't have been. And I think that probably had a piece to do with me never going over there, right? You were always hearing the stories of terrorism and this and that, and Jackie's absolutely right. I mean, the process of getting in and the questioning you go through at the airport, and things like that. So I think that probably had played a part in it, and it was something that was always on my list to do, and I didn't get around to it. And then ironically got to do it in this really special way this year, with honestly trying to help spread awareness through sport, and a group called Athletes for Israel as well. And now I thought for sure, look, this is going to be an amazing thing. We're going to take student athletes over there and play games. And we didn't only go to Israel, we went into Palestine, and we went to Abu Dhabi, so to go to an Arab country as well. And you could see, I mean, we have concrete stories of just that animosity. Just the student athletes wearing t-shirts that said something about Israel on them, got some crazy looks. And There was a gentleman from the organization who wears a yarmulke, and when we went into the airport there in Abu Dhabi, he was treated much differently than the rest of us. And yeah, and I'll tell you, Renae, we've known each other for a long time, and we've joked sometimes that if you don't self-identify, you don't have a yarmulke on, you basically just kind of blend in with everybody else. They don't know if you're Jewish, they don't know if you're not, right? We've talked about this in MOAA, not a luxury that many of our members have, right?
Right.
So that was really, really interesting to see how it is every day a serious problem for many people.
Yeah. So Jason, have you experienced any, anti-Semitic words or actions that have kind of jarred you, disrupted, your day or your, what I'm saying, or your work or anything that has made you uncomfortable, not just during what's happening now currently, but even in the past that you maybe buried or didn't talk about?
Currently, we've had some things happen on campus. Jackie and I had talked a few days ago about the swastikas and things that have been, coming up on campuses, since this whole thing happened on October 7th. But, previously to that, I would say it's more the offhanded comments and the little maybe microaggression-y type of things that, that happen. Oh, I got a lot of "you don't look Jewish." I got a lot of that, all through growing up. I think, but more recently, I've seen in the last few years just some of the animosity that's coming out, and it kind of, is not what I experienced when I was younger. Just that people think, like just using the word Jew as some, insult, right? And again, with a lot of our MOAA family, I think we could identify with those, type of comments coming out that you go, what is that? Is just that word meant to insult me? I've had more of that, but I have not had a whole lot of that experience. At least not that I was aware of when it was kind of when it was happening. Maybe in retrospect, looking back at it, there was. So I don't know, Jack might have different thoughts.
Yeah, Jack.
It's not going to make New Jersey look good. I experienced a lot, and our family experienced a lot. So first of all, one morning we woke up and the Jewish cemetery in our town had swastikas all over it. So that's pretty scary and impactful that someone would come in and deface the entire Jewish cemetery. My dad was a really long time coach in our high school. He has a track named after him after the fact of this, but while he was coaching, my brother was also coaching football and had to discipline a student. And the parent of the student that he disciplined tried to run my dad over with a car, and then went into the office and told the vice president of the school that the Nazis left the Schumans, my last name, out when they threw the Jews in the oven. And I actually couldn't believe when I heard this. It was close to when my dad retired from the school, and the vice president said he would not speak to it. So nothing was done. And in fact, my brother was fired.
Oh, wow.
So clear anti-Semitism, and the person who was fired was my brother. And I mean, those are pretty impactful things. I was away working somewhere in another state, and I remember coming home and I didn't know what was going on. And my stepmom said, "Oh, your dad's been very upset. Here are the things that have been happening." When we were at dinner, I said, "What has been happening?" There was a lot of anti-Semitism in my hometown. We had skinheads in school. Someone carved "Die Jew" in my brother's chair. So we experienced that a lot. I can share that when people know my identity, I've experienced it. I was out with actually a guy I was dating at one point, and I went to pay the bill, and I was just processing for a second, and he said, "Don't be Jewish. Give them the adequate tip." And I said, "Excuse me?" I was processing the tip, and you all know me pretty well. That didn't go very well for him. So I've experienced.
He didn't get a second date.
I've experienced these things over and over, I would say, throughout my life. I was at a previous institution that had swastikas on campus twice, not during this time. And so I've experienced it on other campuses. So I also feel like we've been seeing the rise in it getting to this point. And it feels like it's a tipping point right now, because now it's gone. You know, when I heard that that was said about my dad, and this was a while ago, I was like, in whatever year this is, somebody could say something about throwing us in the oven. We're hearing it everywhere right now. We're hearing it all over the news. We're seeing it on campuses. People are chanting it. To hear people chanting things like this in New York City is something I can't even process. And I have found it very difficult to process. And, you know, I commend our campus for the way that they have handled things on our campus. And I have felt great support on our campus, you know, when anything has happened. But I also had to send something out to our community, and I received something back that was very upsetting, and I won't share, but I say that to say, you know, it's a very troubling time. And I think we kind of keep going back and forth and mirroring each other on this. When all of this first happened, I was away on October 7th. Women Leaders was happening at the time. And very shortly, I had back-to-back trips. So I wasn't on campus that much for a period of time as this all unfolded. I was scared to go back to campus. I kept poking around saying, "What's going on? Are we seeing anything? Is anything happening? What's happening?" I'm, you know, texting my deputy, said, "Hey, is anything happening? Is anything happening?" Because I was actually scared. I was scared what I was going to see. And I sit on the cabinet, who has been nothing but supportive, and they have been phenomenal. My chancellor has been a phenomenal leader around this. And I will tell you, before I went back, I felt unknown. Like, I felt like it was an unknown. Like, will I walk in the door and I will find everyone is anti-Semitic and hates me and wants me dead? And those were real thoughts that were happening over and over and over and over. And the first time that I went back, you know, fully to campus, I had to walk into an event where I was speaking. And that morning I woke up and basically said, I have to text a few people and let them know I'm struggling before I can walk in the door. And I texted my deputy chancellor, my two deputies, and our colleague who oversees sport leadership and administration on our campus, because he's done so much work around advancing issues of social justice in sport. And he's a person I can talk to about so many issues, and basically said, like, "Hey, I'm not okay. I'm just letting you all know I have to find a way to talk about this." And it helped give me, I don't know how else to say this, the courage to like leave my place and go on campus. And no, people knew that I wasn't okay, and they all were immediately supportive. And that, so anyway, I've gone off on a tangent to say I have been very directly affected by these things my whole life in a multitude of ways, leading up into, including now. I'm really fortunate, and I know some of, you know, what people will want is takeaways, right? I'm fortunate to have had the support that I have in my cabinet to make me feel like when I walked back on campus, I'm going to be okay. People are supportive. They're going to listen. They're going to offer resource support, and I'm in a safe place. And I'm speaking for myself, but I know, you know, from the conversations we've had, that there are many people, and many Jewish people, who have not felt safe. And because of the great minority that Jews are on any campus in probably almost any university in our country, it's very scary to even say something if you may be impacted, because you might be one or two. So anyway.
No, that's powerful, from both of you, because how do you make sense, specifically for you, Jackie, how have you tried to make sense of the things that you have experienced or felt, and communicated that to others from an educational standpoint? Help me, understanding that unreadiness, that fear that you felt that day coming out of your house, knowing everything that's happening within the country. What was what was in you that you're like, I'm just not okay. I can't move right now.
This is where our access to so much information that we can see everywhere both informs and can be really scary, because up until that point, all I saw was media, information, social media, etc., right? And so I didn't know what like the people in the space around me were thinking or feeling or doing, if that makes sense. My first response is the first thing I was doing. The only people I would speak to were family members. I literally wouldn't speak outside of my family. And very specifically, my Jewish family members and my mom, because my mom's Christian, but she's my mom. So very specifically, I would only speak to them. And I kept saying, I've got to find a way to be able to get past this. And like, I felt fortunate I was off campus, but it also created an unknown in my mind that I didn't know what I was going back to. Then essentially that morning I realized, someone has to know how I'm feeling, because if I need support, I need them to know I'm not okay. There was also this part of like, I was running an event, and if I'm really terrible, maybe this was like a little bit of like hedging for myself. Like, hey guys, if I don't sound so good today, just know I'm okay. So there's probably a little bit of that going on. I didn't know how it was going to present, but I was going into a 200-person event. And I also, part of what scared me was what was going to be in the audience that were unknowns, because we brought people to our campus that could throw me off. And we needed people around me to know what was going on with me should that happen.
Yeah.
So should someone there go up on stage and say something that could affect me, or something happen in the crowd, I wanted people to know that. The other thing, to the point of your question, is I then shared with my cabinet and with my coaches and with my staff, here is how I'm experiencing this. And I'm sharing with you because I need you to know you may have students experiencing things in this way. Whatever their identity is, you need to know I am actually not sharing this with you. At that point, I found my space with my cabinet, with the professor that I knew could be helpful. Those are the people I talked to when I tried to process this a bit. But I shared with our team, you need to know this is how I was feeling, so you can understand the importance of checking in with your student athletes and each other. Because if I was struggling this way, you may have people on your team who need you, and you may not even know it right now. So I tried to use it to share that we need to support each other and we need to check in. As Jason said, you might not even know you have a Jewish student
Right.
on your team, and we were finding in our campus population, the other thing is I was getting information now, once I got back to campus from what was happening on campus, that they were hearing when the few Jewish people were coming in, that they were saying, well, we're really scared. Well, we want to say something. We want you to know privately, but we're very worried. We're very scared. We don't want to say anything outside of here. So, I will add this is very important for me to add. One of the things that scared me the most is I've worked in social justice work my entire career in college sports. Sports has led in so many ways around so many issues in society. I felt like most of the people I normally would go to, I was hearing nothing from. One of the scariest things to me was the people I would normally connect to sort through it, figure it out, find a way to try to do something about it. I heard nothing or very little from them, when I'm used to sort of being able to like mobilize a whole crew of people who, hey, let's talk through this, let's figure this out, let's process. That was not happening, and I was asking for it.
Oh, wow.
It was a new landscape for me, somebody who always activates around issues, whether they directly affect me or not. So the other thing I did was take a step back and find the places. I'm in Boston. Things are happening in Boston where I could activate and hear, you know, Robert Kraft and the Kraft Foundation already had an organization stand up to Jewish hate. We had connections to them. I reached out to them, had a conversation and said, hey, I'm trying to figure out what more we can do. So I've started to get resources from them. We've started to talk about what are the things we can do with them. And then some of my other colleagues on campus started reaching out to organizations in this area. So I would share, and I think this is important for people to hear, you know, I didn't have college sports the way I've always had college sports to advance a social justice issue that was personally really impactful to me and candidly had me really fearful. And it was really troubling to me, that silence. So I found another avenue. But if, you know, if I could share anything in terms of the support that people give, this is a really, really difficult issue right now. Reaching out to people, checking in on them, asking if they're okay, hearing them when they're saying, hey, maybe we can do something. Hey, maybe, even if it's, we don't know what to do, can we talk about it? Can we process? Even saying, I don't understand these issues, which I think is a lot of, this is tough. A lot of people don't understand these issues, and a lot of people do not understand anti-Semitism.
That's true.
Even saying I don't understand it, so I'm trying to figure out a way, would probably ease some of the fears that I had. And, you know, an industry that essentially is one of the most powerful places for education and inclusion, you know, how do we find a way into the conversation right now? Because there are still people who need that, and finding a way in the conversation can just be outreach and care and empathy and support.
So Jason, I mean, would you, maybe elaborate on that piece? I think, you got into how we can support. I think, when Jackie reached out, that was one of the things like, hey, we need to figure out a way to support, especially in this community of college athletics, because we normally do lead in this space. And, saying, so it hurt my feelings, I'm saying, for, her to say, you guys are silent. And I said, no, no, no. We can speak out. We can put something together to make certain that voices are heard. But what do you feel you can add to that is what we can do to support you?
Yeah, I think Jackie summed it up really well. I mean, it's, this is not as cut and dry an issue as some of the other things that I think we have, rallied around, let's say, in college athletics, and at other times when, you do kind of reach out to your folks to see how they're doing. Look, being Jewish is a very, very tiny minority of our business, just like it is of our society. And it's probably not the first thing on folks' minds. I definitely noticed kind of what Jackie was saying about some silence, right, around the issue. And I think a lot of that, to be fair, is because people are not educated and don't know enough to separate, the political issues from the geographical issues from the human issues, right? I mean, I think that I thought that we were at a place in our evolution where we could all kind of agree that raping, murdering, beheading innocent children and women is bad. And what I've learned is that we're not at that place. And even if some of us feel that way, we won't actually say it because we think that that would mean that we are anti-Palestinian, pro-Israel, and it's political issue, which is just not true, right? And I think that being educated on the history is important, but I think at a very baseline, lowest common denominator kind of thing, we have all rallied around the fact that hate is bad, and acting on that in this inhumane, barbaric way that has been captured on video for everyone to see, and to Jackie's point, put in there on social media, ad nauseum. It was definitely telling that there was not more of an outcry of checking in on folks, I would think, and just kind of at least rallying around that and saying, I don't understand all the issues. Maybe you can help me understand them, or suggest a place I can go to help understand them. But at this, low level, that must be horrible for you. How can maybe we support you? I have not had the same experiences as Jackie has, whether it be on campus or probably just the type of person I am, because I probably internalize things more than most, and people will know me as an extrovert, but not necessarily one who talks about my own issues or feelings around things like this. So it definitely has set something off in me about trying to educate people in as non-threatening way as I can, and whether it be about the culture or whether it be about the history. I think that there's something that everyone can do. I don't know that it's necessarily one group of people's responsibility. These conversations sound just like conversations we were having a couple of years ago. When George Floyd was murdered, and talking about checking in on people and knowing that people are not okay, and knowing that we need to be educated. I think that in this particular case, yeah, it's up to everybody to do a little bit, because if we do nothing, I think we're headed down a tough path. And kind of to the point before, I'm a big believer, if you don't kind of read up and draw the ties between history and what's happening now, then history is going to repeat itself, and that is something that I don't think we can allow to happen. As far as college athletics goes, I don't know that I'm not necessarily thinking that people need to make grandiose statements, especially when it comes to politics and who they're for and who they're against. I think that we are all humans. It's something that we all try to always at least agree on, that we need to be decent to each other. And some of the things we're seeing are just really, really horrific, and they just hit differently depending on who you are and what your experience has been. So I'm hoping that we can at least talk about what the areas we can agree on, about things that we don't want to be happening in society, in our profession. Certainly, I think checking in on our student athletes is paramount, and I would hope at this point, over the last few months, that's happened on many campuses. But because again, the students certainly are probably in a place where they're afraid to speak up, at least some of them. And we've had some great conversations on campus, but again, it is a very small minority of the campus.
Well, I would say that because what happened on October 7th didn't happen in the States, some people may have disassociated themselves from how it would affect a Jason or a Jackie. And so I would maybe submit that it might have not been the intentional silence, I'm saying, that you was like, okay, people are being silent, this is not good, and these are not people that are normally silent about things that matter or things like that. I think it was and I'm gonna speak for myself, and well, a couple of the people that I know I've spoken to about this to ask them their thoughts. And it was more so of, yes, what was happening was really, similar to what happened, during the time of the George Floyd murder. However, because it was in our face every day kind of thing, people felt a little bit more glued to it, and the conflict on October 7th, because it happened so far away, they didn't attach how it would affect those right here, what I'm saying, at home, and their families, and knowing that they might have relatives, what I'm saying, that were affected or still there and dealing with it. And like you said, I think it was important for you all to say that, to say, no, this is how this affected, what I'm saying, affected me. And you're still dealing with it because it's still happening, it's still going on. It hasn't ceased. The thing with George Floyd was kind of happened. And then, we were dealing with aftermath, but you guys it hasn't ended. It's still going. And so I think that means that there's time for people. And so I'm, trusting to the MOAA membership, that there is still time for you to do what they've just said, to do the check-ins, to educate yourself more on things. I remember when I was at the University of Miami, that's exactly what I did, because I was confused whether being a Jew was a religion, or is it an ethnicity? I was like, which is it? And we were, and the young lady that was working with, we had some awesome conversations, and it was a safe space. And so I am encouraged to that too, making certain that it's that safe space where I can ask what I don't know, and not, not being taken, offensive that I don't know,
Yeah, I think that's a
share?
huge important piece.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just saying, I think that's a huge important piece, is to feel that you have a group of folks that you do feel safe with, that you can ask questions with, and it can be what you think would be silly questions, right? And like what are you, right?
Right.
Like, what does that mean? And that's a great, entry
what are
into a conversation. And I'm not in any way indicting anybody who felt just as you mentioned, right? I mean, this is something that's happening half a world away, and many people are getting, little snippets of news here and there. I would say, look, I've made a very conscious effort to try to kind of not look at social media comments and things like that, because it does hit close to home. But I actually probably would suggest that some others just spend a tiny bit of time looking at some of, a post about something with this conflict, and click on the comments and look. And you will not see anything intelligent, but what you will see is how much hate there is out
hate. Yeah.
there. You know?
Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that you shared. And, I think one of the things, a colleague said this to me the other day, because of this device, nothing's just over there, right? So even when something starts over there, which obviously we just spoke to all the ways these things are tied into culture, our background, religion, ethnicity, etc. But, when it comes to our students, even our staff, our coaches, etc., it's constantly flooding you with information. So we're in a time where, when previously maybe things could just remain over there in that space, they can't anymore. Right. And we're in troubling times that, unfortunately, I don't think are going away. They're not going away anytime soon. In 6 months, there might be something else that's really troubling. But the thing that Jason said that we all have to agree on is, that treating people as humans is important, and standing up against hatred when we see it is important. And what I would say about the education piece is, and I think it speaks to everything. I think it speaks to a lot of what you just said, Renae, and some of what Jason just said as well. People often don't understand anti-Semitism. It is a different kind of hatred and a different kind of racism. And, you know, I was saying this to my dad last night, you know, I was looking at one piece of data about anti-Semitism, and then I was looking at another piece of data. And one of the data was, you know, from a neo-Nazi group, you know, and I was saying, so Dad, like, we're not white enough for the neo-Nazi group. We're not people of color enough for people who are not neo-Nazis and are people of color. Like, where do Jews stand in this? You know, Jews aren't white, but they're not white.
Right.
And, you know, talk about confusing. It is really complicated and complex, and it is a very different kind of hatred. And it goes back thousands of years. And so I think the Holocaust gives us education about what happened and what could happen. I mean, when Jason says, you know, that we're an overwhelming minority in athletics, we're an overwhelming minority when I say on campuses, the next thing that comes to mind for me is because we were almost exterminated. So we're an overwhelming minority because there was a goal to exterminate Jews. And we have to be very careful that we understand what anti-Semitism is, so this doesn't repeat. Because the path we're on, the biggest fear I had was, it doesn't matter, by the way, when I'm half Christian, half Jewish. I'm Jewish. And if this all repeats, I'm gone. And if you care about the people that you care about me, you care about Jason, you care about people, you have to care that there is a really strong wave moving towards that. And if we don't understand it, then we have to get educated on what anti-Semitism is, because I've had some of those conversations with friends. I had one of my best friends, we had a conversation and we had like a little heated moment, and then we got through it and then we kept going. But the heated moment was because he didn't even realize what he was saying was anti-Semitic. And then it became, well, is everything anti? I said, I need you to just listen so I can actually explain some things. And then I'm happy to talk through what you could look at to better understand anti-Semitism. But I have to have you listen, because you don't know that what you're saying is anti-Semitism. And it speaks to the point that so many people don't understand it. And without the understanding, it absolutely can be repeated. And that's what we're seeing that is very scary. And my last point I would say is, this has been on the rise, as I said before. When I interviewed here, a lot of what I talk about in my interviews is the diversity, equity, inclusion work that I've done, because it's been so much of the work that I've done in my career. I was very intentional to explain my cultural background and to say I was Jewish when I interviewed here, because I want people to know that when I talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and I have a whole other cultural background, we could do a whole other session about it if you'd like. But the reason why I said I was Jewish is because I was seeing the rise in anti-Semitism. And I wanted it to be crystal clear that everyone who was on that hiring committee, if they were talking about DEIB, they knew they were going to have a Jewish person in that chair. And that mattered to me because I saw the hatred on the rise. So I say all that to say, you know, we've had some different experiences, Jason and I, we've had some similar experiences. But this is serious and it's scary. And, you know, it does mirror some conversations that we had when George Floyd was murdered. If you don't understand it, get education around it. And we can think more about the resources, et cetera. One of the reasons I've started looking at Crafts Movement, other than the fact that they're great partners for us here, is they focus on data. They have a command center where they track data. We're going to look at what they do. So we're actually looking at real data of what is happening. It's scary, and it also informs the importance of doing something and better understanding these issues. So I will be quiet now. I talk a lot. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, you guys have provided amazing information, hearing your backgrounds, understanding the tie with what happened on October 7th to how it tied to you personally. I think it was the most impactful thing that I've heard, and I think that our members need to hear and understand, and also what some of their student athletes who are Jewish may be feeling as well, and to make certain that you guys know that you do have that space and that platform.
Renae, can I share one more thing that I
Sure.
think is really important for people to hear? Because I know there's a greater landscape to this, right? And we're here to talk about anti-Semitism, so it's what we're talking about. People can question things, have their own views, whatever it is. I want to be crystal clear that one of the scariest things to me, I know so much has happened since October 7th. Right after the attack on October 7th, before Israel went in and responded, I was already seeing anti-Semitism on my feed. I'm emotional when I think about it. Israel had not responded. So I just want to be really clear that I know there's a lot that's confusing right now. The anti-Semitism was there immediately. People were burned, people were raped over and over again. They were beheaded. They were mirroring things that were happening in the Holocaust, something that would be so triggering to any Jewish person, like burning bodies. And immediately I saw on my social media feed people saying the Jews deserve that. And nothing had happened in response yet, nothing. So it is important for people to understand anti-Semitism is absolutely real, and hatred against Jews is real and has been on the rise and is going to a tipping point, and we have to do what we can to stop it.
I totally agree. And the work that you're doing with the Kraft, Robert Kraft and his center, can you make sure that you provide that information to me so I can have that attached to the end of this? So someone else who may want to, be involved in that and get more information, they can assess that information.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I definitely thank you guys so much for, just your heart, you know what I'm saying, and just not shying away from how it is making you feel, and letting us as your membership, as you're part of the membership, letting us into how you're feeling and what you're thinking. I'm definitely going to tell them to publish this in full because I think the whole conversation is necessary for them for folks to hear. And you guys, please don't hesitate to reach out again and say, hey, there's more to this. And I know it is more to it, don't get me wrong. But these courageous conversations will continue. There's going to be something, something like you said, something else 6 months from now that's going to cause us to want to, come back to the table and say, hey, here's something that's still rising up in me and making me nervous, and we need to talk about it. Please know that MOAA is that place. So again, I'll end with, this is MOAA Courageous Conversations, a thoughtful place for our members to share their personal experiences, and we seek to amplify and educate and support our members' voices. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jackie. And we'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Thank you.